How's everybody doing? All right. Well, welcome everybody to this next installment of the Sunny Assets Tour. I want to thank the New Life Worship Center here in Sacramento on Woodbine, 7005 Woodbine, for allowing us to come in this evening and talk to you about energy and solar. And so I appreciate that. Thank you very much, Bishop, for allowing us to do that. So tonight we want to talk about solar and energy. And we're going to repeat some of the things we talked about last week or last month, but we will try to cover some new ground. So thank you for everybody that's here. Thank you for watching out there on the internet. So one of the first things I want to do is I want to introduce myself. So for those who haven't met me before or know who I am, my name is Chris Sherman. And I have a consulting company called Umbrasol. And in that we work in solar. I've been involved in the solar business for about 10 years now and have been involved in technology for probably over 30 years. And what I want to do tonight is educate you. I'm not really looking to do anything other than start a conversation. Because if we can have a conversation and we can understand each other a little better and we can understand what the goals of energy conservation and solar is, then we can make rational decisions. A lot of times in life, we end up making decisions with a lack of information. So really tonight is about a conversation. I'm not going to get deep into technical things. It's really just to start that. And if that conversation continues after this evening with other people that you know, that's good. That's good, right? Because that'll help us answer questions, okay? So I've been involved in several hundred megawatts of solar. What does that mean to you? It means that I've been involved with solar with a value of somewhere around, we'll call it $200 or $300 million worth of solar, plus or minus. Majority of that has been commercial solar, but also on residential solar. But what we want to talk about tonight are those things that are just encompassing of solar. So that's kind of who I am. I'm from the Sacramento region. I actually live in Lodi, California. And I want to instill some of that education to you. So the first thing I want to talk about tonight is something that kind of gets glossed over a little bit when we talk about energy and energy for your home, and that is conservation. Whenever I talk to somebody about solar on their home or on their business, we want to talk about conservation as well. The reason why we want to talk about conservation is, frankly, it's self-serving to the guy who's selling solar. And I'm just going to be honest with you tonight. Okay, I'm not here with any other agenda except for to give you education and allow you to make decisions on your own. So when I go out and I sell solar to somebody, whether it's commercial or residential, the last thing I want to do is put a bunch of solar panels on their roof, and then somebody comes along with conservation, and now your power bill is less, and now you think I sold you too much solar, right? Because now you have too many solar panels on your roof and your bill comes back and says you over-generated. I don't want that to happen. And it's self-serving for me because I don't want to look like the guy who sold you too much, frankly. But it's also not serving you as a customer if I've done that. Now, if a person decides to do conservation or doesn't decide to do conservation, I can't help that. But I think we should have that conversation. Because if we have that conversation, we can start to decide whether or not these other cost components are important to me going solar. So when I go to a house, I ask them, how old is your air conditioning unit? How old is your refrigerator? How old is your washer and dryer? How do you heat your house? How do you cool your house? Do you have windows that are insulated in your house? Because conservation is the best way to go to reduce your energy bill to start with. Give you an example on my own personal residence. I had a house in Penryn, California. We bought the house. The bills were somewhere north of $300 a month. We replaced the washer, the dryer, the stove. It was an all-electric house. There was no gas. The washer, the dryer, the stove, the refrigerator. Forgot what it was called there for a minute. Refrigerator and the freezer. We replaced all of that, and we replaced the air conditioning unit. Our bill went to $175 a month. Right? We didn't replace lights and those kind of things because we really didn't have that many lights. But you should look at that, right? Whether you want to go LED or compact fluorescent, those kinds of things, you want to take a look at that. So let's always have that conversation about conservation. What can we do to reduce the bill before we eliminate the bill? Because sometimes if we eliminate the bill and then reduce the bill, we're kind of stuck in a middle ground there where it looks like somebody didn't do the right thing, okay? So, without going too far down that path, the other nice thing is that there's a lot of financial institutions that believe that as well. So, there are some banks, and I am up here to educate, so I'm not going to say any company names, except for my own. But I'm not going to say any company names because that's not what I'm here for. I'm not here to promote anybody else. But there are some banks out there that if you go to them and say, hey, I want to put solar on my house, and I want a new roof, and I want new windows, and I want a new air conditioner, they'll bundle all that together in one loan and take care of it all at once, right? So you can get those things taken care of in the same fashion, reduce your power bill, do the right thing, have one loan to pay it all off, okay? So there's some good financial incentives out there to do those conservation efforts as well. So check into that, all right? Well, I want to kind of recap a little bit from last week and talk a little bit about what's going on in solar. Now, the solar industry is like any other industry. It's always changing, always things, making things happen, new incentives and those kinds of things. And one of the things in solar is, we're going to talk technology for a minute, okay? A lot of people will come up to me and say, well, geez, Chris, I don't want to do solar because next year they may come out with some new technology, and the new technology may be better than what I got now, and then I'm going to feel like an idiot because I bought bad technology. Okay, understand the question. It's not relevant. Okay, so when you go to do solar on your house or your business, what you're doing is you're putting a solar panel or a product on your house that is commercially available and what's called bankable. In other words, somebody's willing to give you the money to do it. Okay? It's bankable and it's commercially available. The technology for mainstream, right, there's some strange things that go on out there, but for the mainstream, the technology doesn't change but 1 or 2% a year. Now, there are things out there that are really cool, right? I talk to guys all the time in our business. We get presented with new technologies on a daily basis. The challenge with most of those technologies is they're not commercially available and they're not bankable. So if you put it on your house, who knows, right? I can't say what would happen or what wouldn't happen. But I can tell you no bank's going to give you the money to do it. Nobody's going to let you borrow the money to do it. So you've got to be able to pay cash for that. And that's fine. I have nothing wrong with that. If you want to be innovative, go for it. But when it comes to the things that you see in the mainstream for consumerism, it doesn't change about 1 or 2% a year. So if you put solar in your house today, the likelihood that 10 years from now it's going to be so drastically different, pretty slim. I can't say that it won't be, because innovation turns on a dime, right? We all see things happen quite rapidly. But the chances are pretty slim that it's going to be that drastic of a difference. And it's kind of like these boots I'm wearing. I bought these boots because I have size 12 feet, and I like them, and they fit, and they do what I bought them for, cover my feet while I'm walking, right? 10 years from now, guess what? They're still going to be size 12 boots, they're still going to cover my feet, and they're still going to do that purpose for which I bought them for, cover my feet while I'm walking. So if you bought solar panels today, and you put them on your roof, and it eliminated your power bill, it will continue to eliminate your power bill. The only thing it might change is if all of a sudden all the kids come home and your usage goes way up. But the fact of the matter is the solar panels are still creating the power that you bought them for, right? People don't know that I think it was 80 years ago today, or this week, is the anniversary of solar panels. Some people say, how long have they been around? Quite a while. Commercially available for 60 years. Now, they were really expensive, but they were commercially available for probably close to 60 years. Okay, I have a solar watch. We have solar calculators. So the reason why I mention that is that what doesn't change, the technology doesn't change, the packaging changes. Okay, so when we look at a solar panel today, the efficiencies are coming from manufacturing and packaging. The actual power production changes are not happening at the solar panel level at such a great degree that you need to worry about it. Okay? Now, there are things going on in the solar industry such as inverters, new inverters, and we'll talk a little bit about that. And new inverters can get you different results. So this is all I'm really going to say about technology. I don't want to go too far down this path, because if I go too far down this path, I start to lose people, right? Because most of the people in the listening audience are not in the solar business. So I start talking photons and protons and all these other kinds of things. Everybody's eyes glaze over, they fall asleep, and then I'm drowned out by snoring noises, which can happen anyways, but I don't want to promote that, right? If you get bored, that's cool. Yo, baby. Well, no earwax in that ear. We're good there. Wow. Too close? Closer? Okay. Yeah, it's right there. It's that steel plate in my head. Yeah. It's magnetic too, so that doesn't help. So, I'm completely distracted now. So, inverters. The way solar power works is that the sun shines on a solar panel. That energy is turned into DC power. That DC power, much like a battery, can be used to do things that a battery can do. Once it's turned into DC power, in order for it to power these lights, that movie camera, all these other kinds of things, it needs to be turned into AC power. So an inverter, some people get the terminologies mixed up and they call it a converter and other things. It's called an inverter. The inverter takes it from DC power and converts it to AC power. Now, there's been a lot of advances in inverter technology. It used to be that when you went from DC to AC, you lost up to 15 or 20% of your power. So if you're creating 300 watts of power and you use the wrong inverter, you're actually only getting 275 watts of power, because that conversion creates heat, and heat dispensation is loss of energy. Okay? So, some of the things that are going on in the inverter technology. They have things called microinverters. They now have things called macro inverters. They have things called string inverters and things called central inverters. They all do the exact same thing with a few slight differences. So if you hear somebody say, hey, we want to put solar on your roof, and we're going to use microinverters. Microinverters is some of the newest, coolest technology out there. But what that is a small inverter that goes on the back of the solar panel. Somewhere on the back of the solar panel. It's about the size of four pieces of bread, right? And it goes on the back of the solar panel. And what that does is it brings the inverting of DC to AC to the panel level, which gets you a higher efficiency. So what you might get with a microinverter is maybe as low as an 8% conversion ratio. In other words, you're only losing 8% of your power instead of 15%. The other is solar panels work much like they're an integrated circuit. They're a circuit. So that's what they work like. So if I got two solar panels together and they're linked together as a circuit, and this solar panel gets shaded, this solar panel doesn't work either. So if you put solar panels on your roof and this one is shaded by a chimney, and you're using a string inverter or a central inverter, this panel doesn't work either. So your whole system shuts down. That string shuts down because you have one panel that is shaded or non-working. A microinverter allows you to have each one of those panels operate independently. So if one gets shaded, the rest still work. So if you're in an area where there's lots of cloud cover, a lot of clouds coming and going, a microinverter is a good choice. They're more expensive, but you get more production when you have intermittent sun. They're more expensive, so if you have great sun, like here in Sacramento, where you might have sun on your roof all the time, you don't need a microinverter. It's going to cost you more money. So somebody comes out and says, hey, you're in Citrus Heights, and you got great sun on your roof, we're going to sell you a system with a microinverter. They're going to try to get you to spend more money than you need to. You need to go with a string inverter or a central inverter, right? You're still going to get good efficiency, but you're not spending that extra money either, okay? So when people start talking to you about solar systems and they start talking about inverters, make sure you get the detail. Talk to them. If they say, we're going to use a microinverter, say, well, why would I use a microinverter? Because it's going to cost you maybe an extra 5 or 10 cents a watt for that system, right? It may not be necessary, okay? Lots of good manufacturers of those products out there. And there's a new manufacturer coming online that I'm aware of. It has a macro inverter where you can take 4 panels and put them into one inverter. Instead of 6 or 8 or 12, you can have 4. So now 4 operate independently of the rest, right? So there's lots of things like that. And again, it can get very technical, but we don't want to get too far down that path. But those are the areas where innovation is changing. Those are the areas where you're going to see differences in performance. And those are what's called, and we'll talk, one of the things I want to try to educate people on is terminology. Because we all have different terminologies in the businesses we do, right? Whether we're a clinician or whether we're a technologist or whether we're a real estate agent or whatever we are, we have terminologies that are industry specific. And solar and energy is no different. So where the gains in efficiency, both from cost and production point of view, are being found in the solar industry is in what's called balance of system. You have a solar panel, everything else is the balance of system. How thick is the copper wire? How far does the copper wire go? What inverter do you use? What junction box do you use? All of that's called balance of system. You got a panel, the rest is called balance of system. Where there's the balance of system is where they're starting to get more of the efficiencies, right? So that's technology a little bit to kind of get you up to speed on that. The other thing that's happening in the solar panel industry is consolidation. So here a while back, there was a company and they kind of banded together a bunch of other companies and they went to the federal government and they said that certain countries were dumping solar panels on the U.S. at a cheaper than manufactured price. So therefore they were having an unfair trade advantage. All those things balanced out, and what happened was that other country was imposed a 30% tariff on everything that came into the United States on those solar panels. Well, they found workarounds to that, so that doesn't apply so much anymore. But what does apply is that tariff put about 300 businesses out of business. About 300 international companies that used to make solar panels no longer exist, right? That's a good thing, bad thing. Good thing is there was consolidation in the industry. Bad thing, it raised the price because you have supply and demand issues. But it also improved the industry because the good guys stayed and the bad guys went away, okay? In panels, they have a thing called Tier 1 and Tier 2 and Tier 3 panels. What that means is Mercedes, Toyota, or Yugo, right? So a Tier 1 panel is the top of the line. Tier 1 panel says this is a highly bankable panel and it's a good efficient panel and it's backed by a good warranty and a good manufacturer warranty. A Tier 2 is a little less than that. Maybe it's the exact same technology as a Tier 1 panel, but maybe they don't have as many installed, so they haven't been considered Tier 1. And then Tier 3 panels are panels usually that come from a foreign land, and you've never heard of the name, and they're really, really cheap. So right now today, panels go for between 60 to 80 cents a watt, depending upon the manufacturer. So if you have a 300 watt panel, which is usually about 3 foot by 5 foot, if you have a 300 watt panel, you're going to pay somewhere between 60 and 80 cents a watt for that. So take 300 times 60 cents, that's what that panel costs. If somebody comes and says, hey, I got a panel, sell it to you for 45 cents a watt. Tier 3 panel, run as far away from that as you can. Because the problem with panels is that they are subject to what's called microfractures and other things that create inoperability in the panels. And you cannot see those inoperable problems without infrared technology and heat sensing technologies to be able to see those micro cracks. Right? If it's a circuit and there's a micro crack, that means the electricity is not going across here, the panel doesn't work. Right? So those are the Tier 3 panels. You want to be wary of those in today's marketplace. So when somebody asks you what kind of panels they're going to be using, do a little research, check it out. Okay, so that's enough about technology. Let's talk a little bit about, let's talk about terminology for a minute. So terminology, when we talked a little bit about this last month in finance. So most of the terminology you're going to hear about when people talk to you about solar systems and electrical is they're going to throw these types of terminologies out. And these are terminologies that are predominant in the energy industry. And you kind of need to know what they mean so that nobody's bamboozling you. Okay? And they all have their place, but they are distinct in what they do. So the first is you're going to hear a lot of people say, hey, we're going to do a residential or a commercial PPA on your building or on your house. And they'll go, well, you know, when you get this PPA, and what this means is you're going to buy the power that we generate and all these kinds of things, right? Well, a PPA stands for Power Purchase Agreement. It's the standard terminology for an agreement that is between those who generate power and those who use power. That contract that sits in between is called a Power Purchase Agreement. It says we're going to generate power and you're going to purchase it at this rate. Pretty simple. But when they come to your house and they say we're going to do a PPA and we're going to sell you power, you kind of need to know what that means. So what it means when they do that, they do a residential PPA on your house or on your commercial building, it means that you're going to pay for whatever power is generated. If it overproduces, you may end up paying for that. If it underproduces, you may end up paying for that. And a lot of PPAs will have what's called a floor and a ceiling. The floor and the ceiling says that no matter what happens, the floor says no matter what happens, you're going to pay this amount. So you have a PPA on your house, and it's generating $300 a month in power. You're paying $300 a month in power. Everybody's happy, right? Your floor is $250. You decide that you're going to go on a European vacation for a month, and you're going to be gone for 2 months. Okay, you're European vacation for 2 months, and you're going to be gone for 2 months. And your floor is $250. But when you leave, you turn off all your power because you know you're not going to be there. Guess what? You still got to pay $250 a month because that's the floor. The ceiling says the most you'll pay is $350 a month. So even if you overproduce, we'll never charge you more than $350 a month. So you want to be wary of that. So when somebody says they're going to do a residential PPA or a PPA on your building, look for the floor and the ceiling to make sure that you can live with that, right? Because those are obligations that the investor has put on the contract in order for them to make their money, okay? And it happens all the time in large-scale energy production. It's just now they're using that same terminology on residences. Somebody may come to you and say, hey, we're going to do a lease program on your house. I want to lease you a bunch of solar to put on your house. I personally, predominantly, don't like leases, and I don't like PPAs. I'm not saying they're bad for everybody, but I don't promote them. The reason why I don't promote them is because they have a lot of other charges in them that make it a little bit more expensive. So a leasing company is a lot like a PPA. The leasing company is only concerned with their return on investment. They're only concerned with making sure they make their money back. And you don't own the system. So you could be in a situation where your house is not being used, but you still got a bill to pay because you have a lease. Much like if you leased a car and the car's parked in your garage for 2 months, you still got to pay the lease payments. Exactly the same thing. You don't own it, and you got an obligation to pay that bill. And the problem with that is, when you look at a lease on solar anyways, you've got a solar company, you've got a finance company, you've got the company who installed it, you've got the leasing company, and then you got the consumer. All those people want to make sure they get their money. I personally, the leases I've looked at, you can almost end up paying 18% more for your solar program through a leasing program. Now what they'll do is they'll still come back and tell you that you're going to save $150 a month on your power. And again, like I said last month, if that's the path of least resistance and you're going to save $150 a month on your power and you can put solar on your house, I would still consider doing it. Because you're saving money on your power. Still a good thing. But just make sure what you're getting obligated to that you fully understand, right? Because what they're going to do is they're going to say, now you are going to lease that solar system for the next 25 years, right? And like I said before, if I had a solar program that saved me $150 a month for the next 25 years, I'll take that all day long, simply because that's $150 less a month than I'm paying, right? Still a savings, but I'm never going to own that system, right? And I'm always going to be obligated to that leasing company. And in some cases, the challenge comes when you go to sell your house, you try to sell your house, you might have to pay off that lease, or the incoming homeowner may have to qualify for that lease. There may be a lien on your house because of that lease. So just be careful what you do in that realm. In a residential area, a lease and a PPA are very similar. It's just a little different terminology. You might also hear an energy company come and talk to you and say, well, we're buying our power from an IPP, and an IPP sells it to PG&E, and the PG&E sells it to you, and you buy it from your solar company under a PPA. In the area of deregulation, what took place was the creation of IPPs, for the most part. They've been out there for a long time, but now they're a little more predominant. What an IPP is an independent power producer. So I'll give you an example. Duke Energy, out of the Cincinnati Valley area, Philadelphia, those areas over there, Duke Energy is a huge IPP. So they actually at one time owned a 1,600 megawatt gas-fired power plant in Moss Landing, California. They owned that plant. And as an IPP, independent power producer, they sold power to PG&E. And then PG&E sold it to you. So that's what an IPP does. So when somebody says, hey, I'm going to talk to you about an IPP, it's an independent power producer. Don't let it scare you. It just means that it's a generation facility somewhere that somebody else is buying power from. Okay? The other thing I want to talk about is community gardens. Now, there's not a lot of community gardens that you see, community solar gardens that you see here in California, but they're there. There's a few of them. It was really a concept that was born in Colorado for the most part. It started a lot in Colorado. What a community garden says, and the reason why I want to bring this up, because I promote this. A community solar garden is a great thing. Okay? The reason being is, let's say we looked at this community here and we said there's 50 homes in this community, and no one person can afford to buy solar. So what happens in a community solar garden concept is we find a piece of land that's within this jurisdiction, and we negotiate with the utility, and we put up one solar farm that everybody shares the power from. Because at the end of the day, the utility does everything on an accounting basis. So if you have a solar farm and it generates X amount of electricity in a garden concept, you can allocate that electricity to an account number. Because once it goes out on the grid, nobody knows where it goes. But you can allocate it to an account number. And when you allocate to account number, a group in a community can share that resource. What's done a lot is in a homeowners association, they might do it on the clubhouse. And then everybody in the homeowners association shares in 1/10 of that power, something like that. So community gardens, you'll hear that, community solar gardens. It's a great thing. I promote it wherever I can. It's a great way for a smaller community or a community of homeowners to actually do solar, right? Everybody shares in the cost, everybody shares in the benefit. Okay? Let's see, what else we got here? Net metering. When I talk with people about net metering, and I spoke about this last time, but I want to kind of rehash it again because a lot of people don't understand it. And it's not a complex concept, but it's a concept that is inherent to doing solar. So what net metering is, net metering says that when I put a solar system on my house, the meter that is attached to my house now will actually spin backwards. Okay? Well, when it's spinning backwards, it's creating credits on the accounting of the energy that I'm creating. So think of it in an accounting principle. So when the solar system is running and it's spinning the meter backwards, it's creating credits at full retail value on my bill. When it's spinning it forward, it's creating debits on my bill from an accounting perspective. And net metering says that at a given time in the future, and they call this the true-up period. So in the true-up period, you will get a bill that says this is how much you generated and this is how much you used. You're responsible to pay for the delta. So if I created $10 and I used $9, I don't owe them anything because I created more than I used. If I created 10 and I used 11, I owe them $1. Net metering. Okay. Now, in most cases, if you overgenerate, you're not going to get a check from the utility. A lot of people say, well, if I overgenerate, why don't I put a bigger system on my house? I'll overgenerate, and I'll get a check from the utility. In most cases, you will not get a check from the utility. So you do not want to overbuild your solar system. Because when you do that, you're just wasting your money. Okay. So what you want to do in net metering is you want to take off the top levels of the power that you're consuming. So here in California, they're going to a 3-tiered system, and in that 3-tiered system, you might pay as much as 32 cents a kilowatt hour for this 3rd tier. One of the utilities just announced they're going to have an 11% rate hike. So you're going to see 11% coming more on your bill. So you got 3 tiers. These 2 top tiers, you're paying a lot of money for those. And you're paying maybe as little as 9 cents a kilowatt hour for this bottom tier. So get rid of these 2 top tiers and still pay the small bill at the end, but you're getting rid of the most expensive power. So when we engineer a system, we want to make sure that we're engineering it to get rid of that expensive power and not overbuild the system. Because if we overbuild the system, you're going to be mad at us because we charged you too much because we sold you too much. Okay, make sense? So net metering is a great thing. It's available on residential and commercial buildings. They don't do the same thing in utility because it's a whole different animal. But where there's a meter, we can make that meter spin backwards and create credits. The nice thing about that is that it creates credits at the retail value. So let's say your baseline retail value is 16 cents a kilowatt hour. So you're creating credits during the day when the sun is shining at 16 cents a kilowatt hour. Well, at night, your rate is lower. So let's say your rate at night is 9 cents a kilowatt. Okay? You have almost a 2-to-1 ratio there. Not quite. My math isn't that good. Let's call it 18 cents and 9 cents. We'll call it a 2-to-1 ratio. So anyhow, you get that 2-to-1 ratio so you can use twice as much power at night and not reduce your debits, your credits. Right? So your debits at 9, your credits at 18, you can use twice as much power and not use up your credits. That's a beautiful thing because they're charging you at full retail, which means whenever you're creating power, they give you credit for the current retail value of that power during that particular time of day. Now, when people come out and they look at doing a solar project for you, there's lots of things that come into play into how to engineer that system. The angle of the roof, how many sun hours there are, and those kinds of things. One of the things that people don't understand that I think they need to, and that is sun hours, right? So we can go here in Sacramento and we can say, hey, the sun came up at 6:30 this morning, and it's still 80 degrees outside, and the sun's still shining, and it's coming up on 8 o'clock at night. We say, man, we'll call that 13 hours of sunlight. Well, in a case, that's true. But is the sun high enough in the sky to actually hit your solar panels? And is it in the southern sky versus the northern sky at what time of the day to hit your solar panels? Solar panels need to be at south-southwest in this part of the world, okay? So what they do, somebody may come to you and say, well, you average of 5.5 sun hours per day. And you go, well, geez, it shined for 13 hours yesterday. Where'd that 5.5 come from? 5.5 comes from a calculation that's done by an organization called the National Renewable Energy Labs, or NREL, out of Colorado. Colorado, NREL, has been tracking weather and energy and those kinds of things for almost 40 years. And they can tell you, at any given zip code, over a 40-year period of time, including rainy days, sunny days, tornadoes, frogs flying down, whatever, squirrels, any of that stuff, they can tell you on average how many sun hours per day your house gets over a course of a year. So they take 365 days, they figure out how many sun hours over the 365 days, and that's how they come up with those averages. So that's how they come up with a 5.5 average for Sacramento, California. So they use those to calculate your sun hours to figure out how many sun hours are going to create solar. Right? Because some days there's not going to be any sun. So that's about enough about technology. Technology can be fun, but it can also be boring. So let's see if we can move on and talk about maintenance. So we only have 3 more hours to go. Not just kidding. It is kind of warm in here, so I know that those that are watching on the internet, we all look like we're all doing spiffy, but got a little bit of heat going on, so it's kind of warm in here, but that's okay. So I hope I'm giving you some information that's going to help you in the future. So I hope that I'm answering some questions for you. And post this, I'm available. There's been flashed up on the screen a few times, my name and telephone number and how to get hold of us. Feel free to let us know what your thoughts and questions are, and in future talks I'll make sure I cover those questions, right? Because this really is about educating you, not educating me, right? So if you okay. Let's talk about maintenance. Do solar panels need to be maintained? Will solar panels wear out? How long will they last? Will they stop producing electricity? Is it going to cost me a lot of money to maintain my solar panels? Do I have to have another company come in to help me maintain my solar panels? So, the cool thing about solar panels themselves, there's no moving parts. So solar panels themselves, the first one that was created for commercial use was created in the 50s. Well, when it was created in the 50s, that particular solar panel was created to light a light bulb. That solar panel today still lights the same light bulb. So the solar panel itself has no moving parts, so it's not going to get wore out. But the solar panel is encased in glass. And as it being encased in glass, it's like this front of this podium. If I were to take the front of this podium and cover it in mud, the podium didn't change, but now I can't see through this piece of plexiglass. Solar panel is the same way. If the glass gets dirty and it gets to a point where sun cannot get through the dirt, it will stop operating. So what you do is you hose it off. Right? Pretty simple. Now, when would you want to hose it off? First thing in the morning or late at night? Because the surface of a solar panel in the middle of the day here in Sacramento, in other places even more, can get to be 140 degrees. So the surface of that glass is pretty hot. So at noontime, you don't want to be squirting cold water on that glass because it will probably break. It's glass. It's made out of the same kind of glass that you find in your sliding glass door, a little bit more advanced than that, but the same kind of tempered glass. So when it breaks, it's going to break up into little tiny squares. Okay? So they need to be cleaned. Now, there are companies out there that have sprung up that are window washing companies, same companies you see go around washing retail windows and things like that actually also wash solar panels. The best thing to wash a solar panel with is clean, clear water and a squeegee. You don't need soap, you don't need detergents, you don't need none of that stuff. Cold, clean water and squeegee them off. That's really about it. Some of the solar panels are actually built now. There's a solar panel that I know of that actually the glass has a film on it that actually helps to slough off dirt. So you don't even know it's there, but it actually removes dirt on its own because of a film that's put on the front of the glass. But it needs to be cleaned. When does it need to be cleaned? How often? It depends upon where you live. If you live in a nice suburban area where there's just some traffic, not a lot going on, people mowing their lawns, those kinds of things, you might not have to clean them, but maybe once or twice a year, if that. The rain may keep them clean. But if you live out in the San Joaquin Valley where there's farming going on, lots of dust in the air from time to time, you may have to clean them once a quarter, once every other month. Right? How do you know when to clean them? You look up at them and they're dirty. Or you notice that you're not making as much power on your bill when it comes. You look at the bill and say, well, I didn't produce as much power last month. I should go look at my solar panels and make sure they're clean. Not a lot to it. Just keep them clean. Now, the other part of the solar system that does require maintenance is the inverter. The inverter doesn't have moving parts, but it has electrical components. It's basically a couple of capacitors and things like that and some electronics. Energy is heat, and heat will make things age, right? So the inverter needs to be checked from time to time. I suggest that you have an electrical contractor check your inverter once a quarter. Just come out, make sure it looks good, right? Make sure it's not hot, make sure it's generating the power it's supposed to, those kinds of things. And that's all you really need to do on a solar system. Other than that, it's a bunch of copper wire and non-moving parts. So maintenance should be a simple thing. But you need to have it checked every once in a while, just like anything else, right? You want to make sure that your refrigerator is working, open the door, right? You want to make sure your solar panel's looking, look at the bill, right? Surprising to me how many people get their electrical bill and never look at it. They just pay whatever it says on it and they never look at it because they're used to that, right? You now have an appliance on your roof. You want to check on it every once in a while, make sure everything's kosher, okay? So maintenance is pretty easy. I suggest you do it on a quarterly basis, and that's cleaning and checking the inverter and some other things like that. So, let's talk a little bit about I have notes, but those of you who know me realize that if I don't have my glasses on, my notes are irrelevant because I cannot see the written word without my glasses on. So I have my glasses on at the moment. And let's talk about consumption. Some people will talk to me and say, hey, why should I go solar? What's the point? What's the point of going solar? It's surprising to me how many people I talk to, and when I say you should go solar, and they say, it's really not worth it. What difference does it make? I get up here and I do these kinds of talks, and I've been involved in the solar industry and alternative energy for a while, and those kinds of things, and I'm pretty passionate about it. I'm pretty passionate about the fact that we need to do something for our planet, and we need to do something different for our communities, and we need to do something different for our personal lives. I think if you have a surface and you're paying a utility bill, you should look at doing something about that. Get some control back in your life. Whether it's 1 panel or 100 panels, you should look at doing something to help reduce your electrical consumption off of the grid. Okay? Now, it's surprising to me how many people say it's just not worth it. It is always worth it. Okay? To let you know, our consumption increases, our ability to generate as a citizenry decreases. So, today, when I look at this forum that we're in today, we have lights going, we have 3 cameras going, we've got a couple computers, soundboard, electrical components stuck to the side of my head, we have all these lights, this going on, these kinds of things. 5 years ago, it would be 1/10 of what we have going on right now, right? So our consumption keeps going up, and our ability to generate goes down. Why do I say our ability to generate goes down? Because generation, if we allow or rely on the utilities to create all the power that we need in our daily lives and that we continue to consume, I mean, heck, they even got electric cigarettes now. Okay, I used to smoke a pack and a half a day. I couldn't believe. Okay, now if you smoke a pack and a half a day and you have an electric cigarette, what do you carry, a battery pack? You carry a car battery with you, right? Smoke those electric cigarettes. So now they got electric cigarettes. They sell them on all the street. I know how they work, so I'm just kidding about the battery thing. But you've got to plug those in the wall. More consumption, right? The utilities, due to regulation, the EPA, lots of other things, are producing less power. Okay? Developing nations are needing more power, but they're producing less power. So we need to take control of that by producing some power of our own. Putting solar panels on your roof to lighten the load on the grid so that that power can be used for additional consumption, right? So we need to do that. We need to put solar on our houses. I'm surprised when I go and I fly over some area, Southern California, or I look at a Google map of Fresno, California, or I look at places like India, and I look at places like even China, and there is a very few solar installations on the roofs. You know, if you flew over down into Orange County right now, and you flew over Fontana going into the Orange County Airport, right, going into the Ontario Airport, you're going to see maybe 3 solar systems on the roofs down there, two of which I did. Okay? But what you're also going to see is over 6 million square feet of available roof space. Why isn't there solar on those roofs? We need to do that. As a community, as people, we need to start finding alternative ways to generate electricity because utilities aren't keeping up with what we want to use. And because of that, they're going to continue to charge more and more for the power that you use because it's a supply and demand issue. They're going to continue to raise the prices. You're going to continue to pay those prices, and you will never get out of that burden if we don't do something about it. So put solar on your roofs. Talk to somebody about it. You don't have to talk to us about it if you don't want to. That's fine. But you should take a look at putting solar on your roofs. Bottom line, right? Last month when I talked about it, I said, well, what if somebody came to you and said, I'm going to put solar on your roof. And when I put solar on your roof, the bill to pay that solar is $200, and your current electrical bill is $200. They're exactly the same. Would you do that? My response is, yes, I would do that. The reason is that once you start paying this $200 goes away. People don't have that paradigm shift that says that when I do one, the other goes away. They think they're paying both, so now their power bill's $400 a month. When you do one, the other one goes away. When I buy solar at $200 a month, in normal circumstances, that's a fixed payment for however long it is. Let's say it's 25 years. It's a fixed payment for $200 for the next 25 years. My utility rate is going to go up on an average of 6.5% every year. So this $200, if I don't do this $200 will always increase. Like I said, there's a utility that just came out with a report. They're raising their rates by 11%. San Diego Gas and Electric. PG&E is raising their rates as well. Why? Because we need more power. We're consuming more power. And they don't have the ability to generate more power. So the way they throttle the industry is they're going to charge you more for power. The only way that's going to change is if you do something about it. Right? And I can't make you do something about it. I can only help educate you to do something about it. Okay? Now, what will you do? I don't know. Right? We got 5 minutes left. And I want to pose this question to you. Have you looked at conservation? And I'm not talking about changing your lifestyle. I'm not talking about watching less TV. I'm not talking about, giving the dog only one bath a week, whatever, right? I'm just talking about, have you thought about conservation? Have you thought about looking into getting a new air conditioning unit? Have you thought about insulating your roof? Have you thought about new windows? Right? Think about conservation. Have you thought about turning a few lights off from time to time? Okay. The second is, have you looked at your power bill recently? Last time I talked about the need to read your power bill. It's still to this, it boggles my mind how many people don't know what is on their power bill. Okay? Read your power bill. Last time I talked about what's called a PPP on your power bill, or a PPG on your power bill. That stands for Public Purpose Program, or Public Purpose Good on your power bill. You're all paying into that as a percentage of your power bill. Last time I used an example of somebody that I know that they pay an average of $5 a month into PPP every month on their power bill. But when I asked them what that was for, they had no idea, because we never questioned it. Well, PPP is free money to the utility that pays for the rebates on things like solar. So you've been paying into that. If you have a residence and you're paying, and you don't even have to own it, but if you're paying a power bill, you're paying money into the PPP. Have you ever applied for a rebate? Energy Star, new light bulbs, insulation, solar. Have you ever applied for those rebates? If not, you've been paying money to the utility that they get to use for whatever they're going to use it for. And they're going to thank you for it, and they're going to keep collecting it from you for every month. But if you don't ask for any of that back in the processes and procedures that they have to get some of that money back, you're just giving them free money. About time you stop doing that. It's about time you go after some of that money. So when we say that a utility is being gracious about giving us a rebate on solar, that's your money. That's your money. I know a guy who has a business, and he's been paying $5,000 a month into a PPP, and he's never asked, what's that money for? Because he has a big business. It's a percentage of your bill. $5,000 a month. He's been paying that for at least 10 years. And he never asked what that was for. He just paid his power bill. Nah, I'm not talking about getting too crazy here or anything, but when you get your power bill, check it out. There was actually a company in Southern California that a few years back, there was a charge on their power bill, had been there forever, and when I called the utility couldn't even tell me what that charge was for. And they've been charging everybody in their ratepayer base that charge infinitum. And when I called their billing department, to this day, they've never been able to explain to me what that charge is. Oh, but you got to pay it. Really? Seriously? Really? They're still paying it. And nobody, you call Southern California Edison and San Diego Gas and Electric and ask them, what's this charge on this bill? They'll send you on the maze of their departments, and they're never going to answer it because they don't know. They don't know, but it's on your bill. So anyhow, I'm going to close tonight. I thank you for your time. I thank you for listening. I hope I was able to educate you. I hope I was able to get you some information. Have a conversation with somebody. Talk about energy. Talk about solar. Talk about alternatives. How can we make a difference? Right? Not just to help the planet, that's important. Not just to help ourselves, that's important. Not just to help our community, that's important, but to help all of those things. Okay? So let's go out and do that. Let's talk about solar. Let's have that conversation over a cup of iced tea on a nice warm evening, like tonight. And let's talk about energy. And let's find some solutions for our homes and our businesses. Thank you very much. I appreciate your time. Give us a call. The number's up on the screen, and we'll answer your questions for you. And certainly send me an email with your questions, and I'll answer those as well. Again, thank you very much, and we'll see you next time.